What if I told you that your greatest weakness, your isolation, your loneliness, is actually the very thing that will make you unstoppable? What if I told you that the very pain you're running from is your greatest weapon? Society has lied to you. It teaches you to fear solitude, to drown yourself in endless noise, social validation, and superficial connections. It makes you believe that being alone is synonymous with failure, rejection, or even madness. But here's the truth: the most powerful individuals in history have all embraced solitude. It's in the depths of being alone that your mind sharpens, your will strengthens, and your soul awakens. Solitude is not a curse. It's a crucible. The weak avoid silence because they fear their own thoughts. The strong walk into the silence and transform it into strength. While the masses beg for validation and cling to shallow comforts, the Stoic understands that true power lies within, where no applause, no praise, and no empty flattery can reach. Solitude teaches you discipline, resilience, and the ability to thrive without crutches. In the darkness, you are forced to confront yourself, your flaws, your pain, your ambitions. And it's only by facing these things head-on, without distraction, that you can truly master them. Stick around, because what you're about to learn could change everything. If you've ever felt that crushing weight of isolation, you're not alone. But more importantly, you're not weak. You're on the edge of discovering something most people never will: the transformative power of solitude. The things I'm about to share with you are not for everyone. They're for those who are ready to take control, to turn isolation into an unbreakable advantage. But before we go on, do one thing. If you're ready to embrace the darkness and turn it into power, hit that subscribe button, like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this truth, and comment below, "I will master solitude." Or better yet, share your own story, because this is Victory Stoic, where the weak are forged into the unbreakable. Number 1. Understanding yourself is the foundation of strength. Man conquers the world by conquering himself, Zeno of Citium. The father of Stoicism understood something most of us never will. True power begins from within. It's not about bending the world to your will. It's about bending yourself to the truth. But how can you do that if you're never truly alone? In solitude, all the comforting lies you've built around yourself begin to crumble. It's uncomfortable, it's painful, but it's necessary. Most people spend their entire lives running from themselves, drowning their minds with distractions, social media, entertainment, endless conversations that mean nothing. According to a study published by the University of Virginia in 2014, when left alone in a room with nothing but their own thoughts for 15 minutes, nearly 70% of participants preferred to administer painful electric shocks to themselves rather than face silence. This isn't just anecdotal. It's a testament to how deeply modern society fears the simple act of being alone with one's thoughts. Why? Because when you strip away the noise, the only thing left is the truth. And the truth is often unbearable for those who have been living a lie. Stoicism teaches us that solitude is essential for true self-understanding. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful men in history, ruled the Roman Empire while practicing Stoicism every single day. His personal writings, meditations, were not meant to be published. They were notes to himself, written in solitude, reflecting on his flaws, his duties, and the nature of existence. In the midst of governing an empire, fighting wars, and battling the plague, Marcus found his strength not in the applause of others, but in the clarity that only solitude could provide. "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul," he wrote. Even as an emperor surrounded by advisors, soldiers, and flatterers, he knew that the real battle was within himself. The ancient Stoics weren't the only ones to recognize the power of solitude. Steve Jobs, the co-founder of Apple, was infamous for his long walks alone, often taken when grappling with complex decisions. Jobs would retreat into himself, stripping away all external influence until he could reach the essence of the problem he was trying to solve. In fact, he believed so strongly in the power of solitude that he incorporated it into Apple's corporate culture. It was during these moments of intense introspection that he developed some of his most groundbreaking ideas. Solitude is a laboratory where genius is born, but only if you are willing to confront the truth. The reason why solitude is so powerful lies in the way the human mind processes information. When you are constantly surrounded by people, your mind adapts to external stimuli. It reacts, it conforms, and it sacrifices originality for social harmony. Psychologists refer to this as social conformity bias. But when you are alone, your mind is free to process thoughts independently, to challenge your own beliefs, to wrestle with your weaknesses and desires without the influence of others. Neuroscientists have found that the brain's default mode network, the region associated with introspection and self-reflection, becomes most active during periods of rest and solitude. It's the part of your brain that allows you to reflect on your own behavior, draw lessons from the past, and visualize the future. Yet solitude isn't merely about sitting alone in silence. It's about directing your attention inward, confronting your flaws, and refining your character. Take, for example, David Goggins, a former Navy SEAL, ultramarathon runner, and one of the toughest men alive. Goggins credits his transformation from an overweight, depressed man to an elite warrior to his brutal self-reflection during solitude. His training wasn't just physical, it was mental. Every time he pushed himself through grueling workouts, often done alone, he confronted his own weaknesses. And by acknowledging them without denial or excuse, he was able to overcome them. Goggins once said, "You have to face your demons before you can defeat them." His demons weren't other people, they were his own limitations, and he conquered them through sheer, relentless introspection. So, how do you apply this principle to your own life? The process begins with intentional isolation. No, not just scrolling through your phone while sitting alone in a room. Real solitude is about eliminating all distractions and turning your attention inward. Begin by setting aside 30 minutes each day where you cut off all external stimuli. No phone, no television, no music. Sit in silence and let your thoughts rise to the surface. At first, you'll find yourself restless, agitated even. That's normal. It's the mind's way of resisting the process. But push through it. As you sit in silence, begin asking yourself hard questions. What am I truly afraid of? What have I been avoiding? What weaknesses do I refuse to acknowledge? One effective exercise recommended by psychologists is journaling. Not just casual scribbling, but focused, brutal honesty on paper. Write down your flaws, your fears, your regrets, and your desires. Break them down, question their origin, challenge their validity. This exercise, which Marcus Aurelius practiced daily, allows you to gain clarity on who you truly are, stripped of all social pretense. Another method is meditation, specifically Stoic meditation. This involves visualizing potential hardships, imagining worst-case scenarios, and mentally preparing for them. Epictetus called this premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. By confronting your fears in your mind before they occur, you weaken their power over you. You develop resilience, not by avoiding discomfort, but by embracing it. Lastly, apply what you learn from solitude by testing yourself in real-world scenarios. Take action based on your introspective discoveries. If you realize you fear rejection, put yourself in situations where rejection is likely. If you fear failure, attempt something you are almost certain to fail at. The goal isn't to succeed immediately, it's to build resilience and self-awareness. Solitude is a crucible. It burns away your illusions, your weaknesses, and your fears, leaving only the truth. And the truth is the foundation of real power. The more you understand yourself, the stronger you become. The world is full of noise, but clarity only comes in silence. Accept it, embrace it, make it your ally. Number 2, breaking free from dependence on others. It is the power of the mind to be unconquerable. Seneca. The Stoic sage understood a brutal truth that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. As long as you seek validation from others, you are their prisoner. They control you, not with chains or force, but with something far more insidious: approval. Human beings are social creatures, yes, but when you base your self-worth on the recognition and acceptance of others, you build your identity on sand. When the tide shifts, you crumble. Consider the life of Matt Reynolds, a successful marketing executive from New York. On the surface, he had it all: high-paying job, endless networking opportunities, a thriving social circle. But every achievement was accompanied by a hunger for praise. He chased accolades, awards, and promotions, not because they brought him fulfillment, but because they brought him applause. And when the applause stopped, so did his sense of worth. Eventually, the pressure of maintaining his public image led him to burnout, anxiety, and severe depression. Desperate for clarity, he took a 3-month leave of absence, disconnected from social media, and retreated to a secluded cabin in the mountains. There, stripped of all external validation, he confronted a terrifying question. Who am I without them? The solitude was agonizing. For weeks, he wrestled with himself, his identity shattered and exposed. But through the pain came understanding. He realized he had been living his entire life chasing shadows cast by other people's expectations. In that silence, he found something far more powerful than approval: self-respect. When Matt returned to his career, he no longer sought validation from colleagues or superiors. He worked for himself, by his own standards. And with that shift came true mastery over his craft. Dependency on others is like walking through life with shackles around your ankles. You may still move forward, but every step is weighed down by the need for recognition, acceptance, or praise. The Stoics called this state of mind prohairesis, the ability to make moral decisions independent of external circumstances. Epictetus, the great Stoic philosopher who was once a slave, taught his followers that true freedom comes from within. No man is free who is not master of himself. For him, external validation was irrelevant. It was the clarity of one's own moral compass that determined worth. Imagine you are a tree. As long as your roots are shallow and spread wide in search of approval, you will be uprooted by the slightest breeze. But if your roots are deep, embedded firmly in your own principles, no storm can tear you from the ground. When you build your identity around external praise, you hand over your strength to others. But when you anchor yourself in your own judgment, you become unbreakable. This dependence on approval is not only psychological, it's biological. Neuroscience reveals that our brains are wired to crave social validation. The release of dopamine triggered by likes, comments, and praise is akin to a drug high. This makes breaking free from societal validation not just a philosophical challenge, but a physiological one. However, just as the body can be trained to resist temptation, the mind can be trained to find satisfaction within itself. A practical exercise to break this dependency is the recognition fast. For 1 week, deliberately avoid all forms of external praise. Don't seek compliments, don't share your achievements, and don't look for validation. During this time, focus only on your own standards. At the end of each day, write down what you accomplished, big or small. But don't evaluate these actions based on how others might perceive them. Instead, ask yourself, was this action aligned with my values? Was it done to the best of my ability? By eliminating external validation, you force yourself to confront your own expectations. This is the essence of Stoic independence. Another powerful method involves premeditatio malorum, or the premeditation of evils. This ancient Stoic practice involves vividly imagining scenarios where you receive harsh criticism or are completely ignored by others. Instead of running from these thoughts, you confront them head-on. By visualizing rejection, failure, or ridicule, you desensitize yourself to their impact. Once you've endured them in your mind, the real thing holds little power over you. Marcus Aurelius himself practiced this technique daily, preparing his mind for the worst so that he could remain unshaken by the whims of others. In a world addicted to approval, breaking free from dependence on others is nothing short of a rebellion. But it is a rebellion worth undertaking. Consider Thomas Edison, who endured 1,000 failed attempts before finally inventing the light bulb. He faced ridicule, skepticism, and outright dismissal. Yet he pressed on, guided not by the opinions of others, but by his own vision. "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work," he famously stated. His self-reliance was his strength. Edison wasn't fueled by praise, he was driven by conviction. To apply this principle to your own life, begin by identifying the areas where you seek validation. Is it at work, where you constantly chase recognition from your boss or peers? Is it online, where likes and comments dictate your self-worth? Once identified, starve these areas of external influence. Do the work for its own sake. When you find yourself looking for approval, stop and redirect your thoughts inward. Ask yourself, am I satisfied with what I have done, regardless of what anyone else thinks? Another tip is to adopt a daily practice of self-affirmation. This doesn't mean repeating empty motivational phrases, but rather affirming your own standards. Write down your principles, your goals, and your expectations of yourself. Review them each morning and commit to living by them, no matter what feedback you receive from the world. Ultimately, breaking free from dependence on others requires a brutal, uncompromising honesty with yourself. It demands that you sever the strings others use to manipulate your emotions and motivations. The Stoics understood this well. They believed that true power comes from self-mastery, from the ability to act with purpose and conviction, unaffected by praise or condemnation. When you cultivate this strength, you become ungovernable, and once you are ungovernable, you are free. Number 3, strengthening self-discipline. First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. Epictetus. This Stoic principle captures the essence of self-discipline with brutal clarity. It's not enough to have dreams, ambitions, or desires. They are nothing without action, and action without discipline is chaos. The truth is, in a world obsessed with instant gratification, discipline has become a lost art. People crave shortcuts, quick fixes, and immediate results. But Stoicism teaches that greatness is not achieved through comfort. It is forged through relentless dedication and ruthless self-control. Consider the life of Mark Peterson, a fitness trainer and entrepreneur from Austin, Texas. Mark's story is one of drastic transformation. At 35, he was overweight, depressed, and directionless. Every attempt to improve his health ended in failure because he lacked the discipline to follow through. Frustrated by his lack of progress, Mark decided to experiment with something radical: seclusion. He rented a cabin far away from the distractions of the city and committed himself to a grueling 3-month training regimen. No phone, no social media, no friends to provide motivation or comfort. Just him, his goals, and the silence. The first 2 weeks were torturous. Without external encouragement, his motivation plummeted. But what Mark discovered during this time was that motivation was nothing but a fleeting emotion. It would come and go like the tide. What mattered was his ability to act despite feeling uninspired, tired, or unmotivated. As the days turned into weeks, Mark's body adapted to the physical training, but more importantly, his mind adapted to the discipline. By the end of 3 months, Mark had lost 30 pounds and rebuilt his life from the ground up. He returned to Austin with a new perspective. Discipline was the only constant he could rely on. Self-discipline is like the keel of a ship. Without it, the vessel may still move with the wind, but it will drift aimlessly, unable to navigate through storms. With it, the ship cuts through the waves with precision and purpose. The Stoics believed that discipline was not merely a tool for achieving goals, it was a way of life. Epictetus, a man born into slavery who rose to become one of the most respected philosophers of his time, knew that without discipline, freedom was an illusion. No man is free who is not master of himself, he declared, and mastery over oneself begins with discipline. Modern psychology supports this idea. Studies have shown that individuals who exhibit high levels of self-discipline are not only more successful, but also happier. According to research conducted at the University of Pennsylvania, disciplined individuals experience less stress because they are able to manage their impulses and resist temptations more effectively. Instead of being at the mercy of their desires, they control them. This sense of control leads to a deeper sense of satisfaction and fulfillment. But how does one cultivate discipline? It starts with solitude. The world is full of distractions designed to break your focus and weaken your resolve. From endless notifications to social obligations, your attention is constantly being hijacked. When you remove yourself from these distractions, you are left alone with the work that matters. Solitude forces you to rely solely on your own willpower. It strips away all external motivations and tests whether you are truly committed to your goals. Here's a practical exercise you can try at home. The discipline hour. Choose 1 hour each day where you isolate yourself from all distractions. Turn off your phone, disconnect from the internet, and commit to a single task with absolute focus. It could be writing, exercising, reading, or practicing a skill you wish to master. During this hour, allow nothing to break your concentration. At first, your mind will rebel, searching for any excuse to procrastinate, But over time, you will develop a mental resilience that transcends motivation. Your mind will learn to obey your commands rather than your emotions. Another powerful technique involves the practice of negative visualization. The Stoics believed that by imagining worst-case scenarios, you build resilience against hardship. Apply this to your own discipline. Before beginning a task, visualize the challenges you will face. Picture yourself growing tired, frustrated, or distracted. Then, visualize yourself overcoming these obstacles through sheer willpower. By preparing your mind for adversity, you reduce the likelihood of failure when it inevitably strikes. The key to discipline lies in consistency. Most people fail not because they lack talent or intelligence, but because they lack consistency. They give up as soon as the initial excitement wears off. They fall victim to the lie that success should feel good, that the path should be smooth. But the Stoics rejected this notion. To them, pain, hardship, and discomfort were essential ingredients for growth. Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers, often reminded himself that life was not meant to be easy. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Imagine discipline as a sword forged by fire. The heat is your desire to achieve something great. But desire alone is not enough. The hammering process, the repetition, the struggle, the pain, that is discipline. Without the hammering, the sword remains a lump of molten metal, shapeless and useless. Discipline gives shape to your potential. Think about Sarah Robbins, a novelist from San Francisco who struggled with writer's block for years. She had countless ideas but lacked the discipline to complete a single book. Inspired by the Stoic principle of repetition and endurance, she committed to writing 1,000 words every morning, regardless of how she felt. No excuses, no breaks. She imposed a rule upon herself. If she missed a day, she would double the workload the next day. After months of relentless effort, Sarah completed her first novel. Today, she is a best-selling author with multiple published works. Her secret? Discipline, not inspiration. If you want to strengthen your own discipline, start by eliminating the noise. Carve out time each day where nothing exists but you and your goal. Practice consistency relentlessly. Track your progress, not for the sake of praise, but for the sake of improvement. And most importantly, understand that discipline is not a feeling, it is a choice. The more you make that choice, the stronger it becomes. In solitude, discipline becomes your guiding star. It directs your actions, sharpens your focus, and builds your character. The world may offer distractions, temptations, and excuses, but when you have mastered discipline, none of them can touch you. Number 4, learning to confront fear. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Seneca. This line, spoken by one of the greatest Stoic philosophers, reveals a truth that most people never accept. Fear is rarely the product of reality. It is the offspring of anticipation, worry, and distorted perception. Fear thrives in the darkness of your mind, feeding on doubts and insecurities. But when you drag it into the light, it withers. Imagine fear as a beast that lurks in the shadows of your mind. The more you ignore it, the larger and more ferocious it becomes. Yet, when you finally choose to face it, you realize it's nothing more than a creature made of smoke and illusion. Its power lies not in its substance, but in your unwillingness to confront it. Take the story of James Carter, a real estate investor from Chicago. James had built his wealth through relentless effort and strategy, but the one area of his life that remained a battlefield was his love life. After a bitter divorce at 38, he couldn't bring himself to trust anyone again. The pain of betrayal had planted a seed of fear so deep within him that he avoided intimacy altogether. Even casual conversations with women triggered his defenses, making him seem cold and distant. For years, he convinced himself that he didn't need love, that success and material wealth were enough. But the truth was simpler and more brutal. He was terrified of being vulnerable. Stoicism teaches that fear is not to be avoided but embraced. As Epictetus said, "He who fears something gives it power over him." James decided to take that advice to heart. Instead of running from his fear of intimacy, he faced it. He forced himself to confront his pain, to dissect it, to understand it. Through journaling, a practice heavily encouraged by the Stoics, he broke down the components of his fear. He asked himself, "What exactly am I afraid of? Rejection? Betrayal? Pain?" And then he asked the most important question. So what? He learned to accept the possibility of pain without letting it control him. Instead of avoiding relationships, he deliberately put himself in situations where he had to be vulnerable. He approached women not with the expectation of romance or approval, but with the sole intention of confronting his own discomfort. And slowly, that fear lost its grip. A practical exercise for confronting fear involves something the Stoics called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. The idea is to vividly imagine the worst-case scenario, the thing you fear most, and play it out in your mind in meticulous detail. By doing this, you train your mind to face adversity before it even arrives. You rob fear of its shock value. For James, this meant imagining scenarios where he was rejected, ridiculed, or hurt. But instead of flinching away, he visualized himself responding calmly, rationally, with acceptance rather than panic. Fear at its core is a distortion of reality. And when you willingly expose yourself to it, when you force yourself to see it as it truly is, you strip it of its power. Another powerful technique is exposure therapy, a method rooted in both Stoic philosophy and modern psychology. By gradually exposing yourself to the things you fear, you build resilience. This method works not only in relationships but in any area of life where fear dominates. Consider the story of Sarah Jenkins, a 33-year-old marketing executive from Los Angeles. Sarah had always dreamed of becoming a public speaker, but was paralyzed by stage fright. The very thought of standing in front of an audience made her nauseous. She avoided speaking opportunities, convinced that she would humiliate herself. Yet, the desire to share her knowledge continued to haunt her. Instead of avoiding her fear, Sarah decided to attack it head-on. Inspired by Marcus Aurelius's words, "If you are pained by an external thing, it is not this thing that disturbs you, but your own judgment about it," she realized that her fear was self-created. It wasn't the audience that terrified her. It was her own mind, projecting failure before it even happened. Sarah adopted a systematic approach. She started small, recording herself speaking on camera in the privacy of her own home. Watching the footage was painful at first, her self-criticism vicious and unforgiving. But she kept at it. She moved on to speaking in front of friends, then small networking events, then larger conferences. Each step pushed her beyond her comfort zone. And with every new challenge, her fear weakened. Fear is a parasite. It attaches itself to your mind and feeds off your avoidance. But when you willingly expose yourself to what you fear, you starve it. What remains is courage, hardened by experience and immune to the illusion of danger. If you want to break free from the grip of fear, start by isolating the specific thing you are afraid of. Write it down, break it apart. What are the worst consequences you can imagine? What would happen if your fear came true? And most importantly, what would you do then? Once you have these answers, practice exposing yourself to the very thing you dread. Not recklessly, but deliberately, with intention. For James, it was engaging in conversations he once avoided. For Sarah, it was speaking to audiences, no matter how small. For you, it might be applying for a new job, confronting a loved one, or simply admitting to yourself what you truly want. Fear is not a monster waiting to devour you. It's a fog that dissipates when you move toward it. As Seneca wrote, "There are more things to alarm us than to harm us, and we suffer more often in apprehension than reality." The only way to conquer fear is to face it relentlessly, to drag it from the shadows and force it into the light. Fear only wins when you refuse to challenge it. But once you confront it head-on, you realize it was never as powerful as you believed. And in that moment of confrontation, you become something greater than fear itself. Conclusion. You've made it through part 1, but this journey is far from over. What you've just learned is only the beginning. The first 4 principles, understanding yourself, breaking free from dependence, strengthening self-discipline, and learning to confront fear, are foundational. But there's more to come. Part 2 will dive even deeper, revealing the final 4 principles that will complete your transformation. These next steps are just as powerful, just as crucial, and will take everything you've learned so far to a whole new level. I know this has been a lot to absorb, but if you've made it this far, you're already ahead of most people. You've taken the first steps towards turning isolation into an unbreakable advantage. But the real test of strength is yet to come. Part 2 will push you further, challenge you harder, and force you to face truths you may not be ready for. If you're ready to continue this journey, make sure you don't miss part 2. Hit that subscribe button, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to hear these truths. And comment below, "I will master solitude." Or better yet, share your own story, because this is Victory Stoic, where the weak are forged into the unbreakable. Stay strong, stay resilient, and remember, this is only the beginning.